You are about to experience a show like no other. Sit back and relax and let us feed your mind on Close Encounters with the BMD. Hey folks, it's the BMD. We're on our show segment on Close Encounters with me, your host, the BMD, and we have a legend on a live video call and live audio call for the channel, our YouTube channel, Close Encounters with the BMD. The legend himself, Ken Gerhard, one of the top people in the world of cryptozoology, and he is a cryptozoologist who has traveled the world, going to tell us some interesting stuff. And he's a researcher, investigator, and an author. Been on many TV shows, and we are so glad to have him on the channel tonight. Ken, how are you tonight, sir?
I am fantastic. Good evening, BMD, and thank you so much for having me on. And may I say it's an honor and a pleasure to be here with you tonight.
Well, you are a champ in my mind. Followed your career for a long time. Watch pretty much everything you do. But I want to twist the interview tonight a little bit and talk about the human element side of Ken Gerhard. So let's start right off. What is your background, your heritage, your culture? Tell the listeners and the viewers, please.
My grandparents on my mother's side were immigrants from the Ukraine, and my mother was born in Western Canada in Edmonton, and so I descend from West Canadian Ukrainians on my mother's side, and my father was born in Owen Sound, there in Ontario, and so my parents were Canadian immigrants, and I was born in Michigan, and I've been here in Texas. That's where I live now. So my sister had a DNA test done. I haven't done one, but I guess mine would be similar. So I'm basically, my heritage is I'm a mixture of different Western European and Ukrainian and different European lineage.
How did you end up in Texas, the great state of Texas?
Well, my father was a PhD in statistical analysis, and he got hired by a pacemaker company in Texas at the time that was kind of like a growing medical implant industry. And of course, it was a lucrative business. So my father left University of Minnesota, where he was a teacher, and took a lucrative job as a scientist with a medical implant company. And so Texas was has been a kind of a booming economy in recent decades because of the oil industry and energy and stuff. So, but I love it here in Texas. It's it really is the Wild West. A lot of free spirits, a lot of independent thinkers, and we have a lot of fun down here.
Do you ever work your way back to the Canadian side?
I travel up there occasionally. In fact, my hat was born in Toronto. So my hat was born at Doc's Leather on Queen Street in Toronto. So
very nice.
Canadian on me at the moment. So I love Canada. Yeah.
So how did you get started in this fascinating topic? I know in your bio it said, about 8 years old, the Bigfoot switch turned on. Your fascination there, lots of traveling with the family as a youngster, the love of outdoors. But how did you pick this world that you're in?
Well, honestly, I didn't plan it. It was just a very lucky accident, I guess. I mean, it's been a lifelong passion and something I've always pursued, cryptozoology, the study of mysterious creatures like Bigfoot, the Loch Ness Monster, Mothman, Chupacabra, all that stuff has been fascinating to me. So I've always been into it. I was a musician for many years. I took about a 20-year detour and was a recording artist and musician, and I enjoyed that. I had a great time, but I kind of got burned out after 2 decades. And this was about the time the internet was kind of becoming a thing, and so I was actually able to meet other Bigfoot investigators, enthusiasts here in Texas. And we met up and we started going out in the woods together and experiencing things. And it just, I just got very lucky. But I think my big break was in 2006. And again, a Canadian connection. I was discovered by a producer for the Canadian Travel Channel who wanted to put me on a TV show in 2006 called Legend. It was on Legend Hunters on Canadian Travel Channel. And that was kind of the beginning of my TV career. So that opened a lot of doors.
So how did you, being a big star now, and you started out at a young age, big star, you've been on many of the TV shows, too many to list, and I don't want to say about that because I want to talk about you. How how can you tell the viewers, give us your typical 9 to 5? Now, I know that's a general term, 9 in the morning, 5 at night. I know that it's probably longer, but we know the slang of 9 to 5. Give us your typical 9 to 5. You get up in the morning. What do you do before you go to bed?
Well, one thing to point out is that as a cryptozoologist, for a long time, I've been a very nocturnal person because a lot of research actually takes place at night. A lot of animals, the animals we're looking for are more active at night. That's kind of a zoological fact. So you have to be around. So I used to be more nocturnal, but lately I've become kind of a transition. So I get up early in the morning, and the first thing I do is drink some coffee, and then I go out and I hike about 3 miles through the woods. And I live out here in some nice wooded areas, so I see a lot of wildlife, snakes and birds, and turtles, and all kinds of deer critters. And I just like to go out and look at the animals, and that's a very good way I recommend for anyone to kind of start the day. It puts you out in a good. But it's real hot here now in Texas, so it's kind of uncomfortable.
So are you outside all day?
No, just the first few hours of the day typically. And then lately I've been working on a lot of projects. And of course I have a little office area here, and you can see I have all kinds of colorful posters and things and skulls and things laying around. But I write a lot. I've written books, and I'm kind of working on projects all the time. And I do a lot of research, so I have to do a lot of reading. So, I mean, it's a thankless job, but I sit out on my patio or wherever, and, there's just so much information to absorb in my field. So I have to stay on top of it. A lot of people look up to me to have good knowledge. So I have to I'm constantly trying to study and learn and improve my craft as a researcher and writer. And then later in the day, I often do like interviews for this, where I'm, promoting my work, but I also do the other side of the coin, BMD, where I'm interviewing people that claim they've seen some unknown creature. They'll get in touch with me and say, I've seen Bigfoot, or I saw this giant thunderbird or whatever. And I'll usually call them and, do an in-depth interview and try to, document their encounter. So I kind of do that later in the day. And then, at night, I like everyone else, I like to kick back and watch.
Are you a movie, TV guy?
Probably more movies, and I'm a little behind the times. I'm not yet one of these, Roku, hot Apple, whatever. I just have an old school cable setup. But believe it or not, BMD, I have a working VCR, and I've got quite a collection of old VHS tapes that have a lot of kind of vintage documentaries that you can't find on YouTube or elsewhere. So I like to watch a lot of the old Nessie, Loch Ness, Bigfoot documentaries from the 70s and 80s and stuff. So that's kind of my.
So you have a full day.
Yeah, the only thing I really fear in life is boredom. So I just like to stay busy, and I feel very fortunate and blessed to be able to, investigate and learn about all of these animal mysteries. It's all fascinating to me. I'm learning.
So how does the land of TV and movies and Hollywood come and find you to get your opinion on all the latest and greatest news on discoveries and value your words of wisdom? How do they connect with you? Is it you have a booking agent, or they just say, hey, Ken, we need you for this movie?
Yeah. Well, it's a little cliche, but I do have an agent in Hollywood, and he gets me work sometimes. But more typically, I've been on a lot of shows, and people will track me down. I get a lot of calls from producers, and they'll say we're developing an idea here or there, and and they'll do an interview, and 90% of the time, those things don't really pan out. They're just kind of developing and looking into ideas and doing research. But every once in a while, they've got what's called a green light from the network, and they say we're making this, and so it's kind of I just kind of try to be on call for them when that happens. I realize it's a great opportunity to be an ambassador for the field of cryptozoology, because I always want to represent my field in the best possible light and sound knowledgeable and articulate and thoughtful. But I also get to go out sometimes on some crazy travel investigation expedition things. They'll send me out to Alaska or Mexico or whatever. So it's a good time when it happens.
So being a legend in your field of work and being a fabulous investigator and researcher, you must have some stories or a tale, certainly where you're not giving away the ranch. Can you give us a little tale or something that happened to you along the way in your career?
Wow. Boy, so much, it's a blur sometimes, but I do like to think that I've got some pretty good stories. I mean, that's one of the things, sometimes when I'm at parties and they're socializing and I'll tell a story and I wonder if people think I'm just making things up, but these things really happen. I will tell you that, working on the TV shows, and keep in mind that I do sign agreements called non-disclosure agreements.
Correct.
Of course, I'm not going to give away big industry secrets.
No.
But it's a creative process, and I'm very passionate about my work. And so I'm sure people will understand there have been situations working on different TV shows where maybe I just, I felt strongly about a certain thing that we were doing a show on, but I'm not writing the checks, BMD. I mean, you understand that
I hear you.
someone else is paying for it. It's their project. So it's like, but I also have to protect my field and my credibility, and and I would never do anything that I considered was hokey or fake or anything like that, and I've never been asked to do that. But sometimes there are just creative differences where the producers have a strong idea of where they want something to go, but I'll have to admit, hey, the evidence may not point in that direction. Case in point, on one of the first TV shows I ever did, I had a producer come up to me one time and he said, okay, today we got to find some Bigfoot tracks. And I was just kind of like, it's like, wow. Just find Bigfoot tracks on a whim. It's like, it's a very chance thing, and you spend a lot of time in the field looking for them. So he was kind of disappointed that I couldn't just produce something like that. It's up to Bigfoot to do it, not me. So, but we took it another end.
How much is your world now about the field of Bigfoot? How much is your weekly time spent on that creature?
Well, I kind of go from topic to topic based on what's going on with recent reports, or if I'm writing a book or doing a TV show. But, I just wrote a new book about Bigfoot recently, The Essential Guide to Bigfoot. And so that's been opening a lot of doors. So when I have people with alleged evidence that are, today I just sent off some Bigfoot hair samples to alleged Bigfoot hair samples to a lab to get tested and analyzed. And, sometimes I have reports and things that I have to follow up on. But, it's kind of seasonal too, the different things happen at different times of year. But I have such a broad interest. I'd say Bigfoot takes up about 40 or 50% of my time, but I also investigate reports of thunderbirds, these giant monster birds, and lake monsters, and mysterious cats, and all kinds of interesting animals.
So what attracted you to this world of cryptozoology?
Well, it's a composite of two of my greatest interests, which are animals. I love animals and zoology, and also monsters, and kind of legends and monsters and mysteries and things. And it's a composite, and it blends those two things perfectly. So it's like, I'm learning a lot. I'm studying the zoology of any mystery or situation. I'm learning about habitat and adaptation and all things that we talk about in zoology. But I also, there's always kind of a weird, creepy mystery or legend or myth behind some of these creatures. And, you know, it's kind of fun to see how people respond to those kinds of stories. You know, it kind of tweaks that little nerve in us, you know, that we all like to be a little bit scared sometimes. And, you know, we all like a little bit of intrigue and mystery, right?
So how about your moved along later in life, I assume, into this thing about penning and writing, and obviously becoming an author on numerous books. How did that blend in? Your story wasn't being heard enough, and or you felt, hey, this is something the public needs to hear?
Well, I actually, that's a great question. I met one of my mentors in the field of cryptozoology, who was a guy named Loren Coleman, who I had read his books growing up, and you know, they had inspired me. And I finally got to meet him many years ago at a Bigfoot conference. And I asked him, I said, you know, I would love to do what you do. How do I make a name for myself in this field? How do I get noticed? And he said, write a book. It's as simple as that. He says, so as soon as you write a book, you'll be given opportunities to present that material in lectures and talks, and you know, who knows, it'll open other doors for you. So that's what I did. I took his advice and I wrote a book about a creature here in Texas called the Big Bird, and it nothing to do with Sesame Street, BMD. It's
I
that's
got
what
you.
they call it. It's a giant bird, much bigger than anything that is known to exist, that's been reported all over Texas. And so I wrote a little book on that, and you know, just kind of went out, you know, took off from there. And I found that there were other books in me, and you know, just again, it's a great blessing to have an opportunity to kind of share some of the information that I've been privy to over the years.
So how do you find a time for Ken, where Ken gets to be with Ken and Ken gets to do things Ken wants to do outside of your investigation and research?
Oh, that's a tough one. Um, I'm a bit of a workaholic sometimes, and I guess that's a bit of a problem for me. I think it does honestly create problems in some of my human interactions and relationships with friends and loved ones, because I get so absorbed in some of these things sometimes. So, let alone myself, you know, that's a great question. But you know, on the weekends, I try to remind myself sometimes that, you know, I should go out and red box a new movie and just kick back and watch it, eat a pizza or something, you know. But that's, you know, I don't worry about that stuff too much. I'm just enjoying the adventure of life, really.
How about your heroes and villains? Who inspires you?
Hmm. Probably too many heroes to list. I mean, I've got so many people that I admire, but you know, I always um, I'm humbled by the work of the sort of the pioneers in the field of cryptozoology. There were some giants, and I'm literally standing on the shoulders of giants. Dr. Bernard Heuvelmans, Ivan T. Sanderson. These were early zoologists that kind of started the field. Dr. Roy Mackle, Dr. Grover Krantz, a lot of the academics. I mean, there are guys that spent, you know, their whole lives or decades pursuing some of these mysteries. And some of them I got to meet, some of them I didn't. Unfortunately, they passed before I was able to meet them. But you know, they've always inspired me, and I'm humbled because I feel like I'm the next generation. You know, the mantle's been passed to me and some of my colleagues to continue on some of the work that they started. I mean, they never thought that they were going to find Bigfoot in their lifetime. They knew they were going to spend their whole lives looking for Bigfoot, and they might not ever find it. And I realized the same thing. You know, we may never find definitive proof that it exists in my lifetime, but I'm convinced that they're out there. So maybe at some point. Villains. Ooh. Boy, that's tough. You know, I'm such an animal lover, and so this is just kind of a general thing. But you know, I'm frustrated by people that don't have a love and respect and admiration for wildlife and, you know, the outdoors and habitat. You know, and when I'm out hiking in the woods and I see like a Pepsi bottle or something,
Yeah.
it aggravates me because, it's like, I don't know. I just think nature is such a gift, and I love animals in the outdoors. And, that's what really annoys me is when I see people that are not respecting the habitat, and, God forbid, people that hurt animals or anything like that is I think, a really terrible thing. I think we should definitely love and cherish animals and the outdoors. And so I guess I'm a bit of a hippie in that way. I don't know.
Well, that's a great answer, as they say on Family Feud. Good answer. Good answer. It leads me to a thought now about what about the fake news that's out there, or you mentioned your investigation with people, perhaps on pictures or fake evidence or this and that. I know that one of your arts of investigation is the multi investigating multi people at the same time, kind of like the police when they're interrogating, 3 or 4 bad guys to see if the stories are the same. I found that interesting. Maybe tell the viewers a little bit about that process, how you came up with that.
Well, there is a lot of fake news with regard to cryptozoology, and a lot of the subjects that I write about and investigate. There really truly is a lot of that. The majority of information on the internet is that. People obviously see iconic topics like Bigfoot or the Loch Ness monster or the chupacabra. They see those as a great way to promote their own creative skills or whatever. But there's just a lot of kind of bad information, misinformation, and I understand that a lot of it's intended to be entertainment, but I'm all about accuracy and facts, getting the dates right, the names right, and the facts right. And with regard to because, I realize to the majority of people out there, a lot of these topics are just kind of fun mysteries or whimsical. But to me, it's serious business. I think there's actual evidence that some of these cryptids, mystery creatures, could be undiscovered animals, remarkable species that would just be mind-blowing if we could prove they exist. And so I take that very seriously. And so that's kind of why I write, because I want people that are truly interested in a subject like Bigfoot to have the best information as far as this is the best evidence that we have. These are the best explanations as to why we haven't found them, what they look like, how we think they behave, whatever the question may be, and a lot of questions out there. So, but yeah, there's a ton of fake videos. It's so easy for people to hoax videos these days of a Bigfoot or something else. There's a lot of fabricated, photoshopped cryptid photos floating around out there. And so I find a great deal of my time right now is spent addressing those hoaxes and kind of fake news things that are being put out there that are confusing people.
Are you enjoying your art of being an author now?
Yes, I enjoy it. Word crafting is an enjoyable pastime. I'm inspired by, I have friends that are authors, and some of them are much more prolific than I am. I mean, they really can put out really quality product much faster than I can, which is a little bit frustrating at times. But my favorite part of writing is the reading in between, because again, if you're addressing any specific subject, if you dive in really deep and go down the rabbit hole, you'll find all kinds of, it'll open all kinds of doors of, avenues of new information and ways of thinking. And so when I'm writing a book, I like to kind of immerse myself in the subject matter and just do massive amounts of reading, on the most academic books I can find, and that's really enjoyable to me.
Did you, at a young age, when I said earlier Bigfoot turned the switch on, do you feel that you've had a fulfilling career on being a young boy with that interest, how things have branched out, being a TV star, being a book author, and a legend in the field.
Well, you're too kind, BMD. Every time you call me legend, I get a little blushy here, but that's very kind of you to say. But I never in a million years dreamed that I would, have an opportunity to do this as a career, even in my way. And keep in mind, I had a pretty vivid imagination as a young boy. I love to do acting and
Right.
music and lots of creative things, but I never envisioned that this would be
Are
something
you
I
there?
could
I
do.
think we lost you.
No, we're all good here. I think it's your connection, BMD.
Yeah. So yeah, it's kind of surreal sometimes being in some of these situations, and reading books as a young man, and then you read about a specific incident in a specific place where this iconic encounter took place between a person and who knows what kind of legendary creature, and then you find yourself years later in that exact location where this supposedly happened. Those things are always kind of exciting because it's kind of like a fulfilling a childhood dream. So that again, I feel very blessed to have so much fun doing this.
You mentioned earlier that you looked up to Loren Coleman as a younger gentleman. Maybe just in to go a little deeper on that, and what sort of brought you into uh, the view of Loren Coleman, because we actually have Loren Coleman scheduled for next month on a podcast. So it'd be nice to give some more information on him.
Well, Loren was very similar to myself, I think, in some ways, in that he, at about the same age that I, got interested in this, as a very young boy, he became interested in cryptozoology. He'll tell you his story, I'm sure. But he started corresponding and writing letters to some of the giants, the pioneers of cryptozoology, and established relationships with Ivan T. Sanderson and Bernard Heuvelmans and others. And so it was something he pursued his whole life. And he traveled and did a lot of investigations in California and Florida and other places. And he was kind of the man on the ground in terms of iconic cryptid cases that happened in the 70s, creatures that are known like the so-called Dover demon and others. And he was he also worked with a guy named Mark Hall, who was a pretty kind of a pioneering cryptozoologist. So anyways, Loren did a lot of the same things. He kind of carved out a blueprint for other potential researchers like myself to follow, which is just, get out there and do it. Travel around, interview people, write books, correspond with other researchers. And so in so many ways, he kind of created a blueprint. But I think where Loren really should also get a lot of credit is that, he's got a fabulous museum up in Maine for people that are interested in cryptozoology. It's really, really fun to visit. But beyond that, cryptozoology has been an evolving field, and he was part of that evolution starting in the 60s and 70s, because he began to explore some of these kind of weirder creature cases like the Mothman and the Dover Demon and the Flatwoods Monster and the Bridgewater Triangle. And he was kind of looking into some of these, like Ivan Sanderson, he was looking into some of these kind of, almost UFO, paranormal kind of cases, that things that had kind of more of a supernatural element. And, it was relevant because some of those cases, there may be connections to the natural world or unknown animals. It's all very ambiguous, so it's hard to say. But anyways, so Loren changed the culture of cryptozoology very much in the 70s. It kind of broadened it, to incorporate a lot more, different types of phenomenon, which is pretty cool.
So what do you feel, Ken, is your end game as time pushes on? Where does your career take you the next 10 years, let's say?
Oh, gosh. Every year is a new adventure. And of course, I'm passionate about doing anything I can to help try to prove or disprove, if that's the case, that some of these iconic mysteries, creatures again like Bigfoot, the Loch Ness Monster, the Chupacabra, the Jersey Devil, Ogopogo. I mean, you name it. There are all these mystery animals that have been reported around the globe for decades or centuries in some cases. And to be able to prove or disprove any of those mysteries would be a pretty exciting thing. But I just kind of take it day by day. I don't really have a real long-term plan. I just feel very blessed to pursue a lot of interesting mysteries and to write about them and meet new people. And but I do want to always kind of represent the field again in the best possible light. So I guess as I get older, I plan on being kind of more of an ambassador and trying to inspire young, up and coming cryptozoologists to kind of launch their own careers and go down their own paths.
How about the career of choice? Has it been fulfilling everything you thought it would be?
Yeah, well, again, I never really envisioned what it would be like because I never thought there was any chance I could do this for a career. But it's been better than that. It's better than I probably could have imagined, because I love to travel, and I get to travel and explore and learn, and I get to work with a lot of interesting people, and yeah, it's just it's a real joy. I really love what I do,
Well,
and I feel very fortunate.
Ken, it's been fabulous, fabulous getting a chance to take the time to talk to you and ask you these questions. So glad you came on the channel. Folks, you've been listening to me, the BMD, as your host, and honored to have the guest, certainly one of my legends, Ken Gerhard, on offering his time and information on talking about the topic in the world of cryptozoology. Ken, I'd love to check in again and catch up with you in a few months and see what you're up to. Give a shout out on your book that's just released and your social media, how people can connect with you.
Well, thank you so much for having me on, BMD. Wonderful. Had a wonderful time, as always. Yeah, my website is kengerhard.com. People can also find me on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. I have a Ken Gerhard YouTube channel where I post little short videos. And people can also look me up on Amazon if they're interested in picking up any of my books.
Okay, Ken, have a wonderful evening, and we will catch up again.
Sounds good,
Thanks
BMD.
again, sir.
Have a good night.
Bye now.
Bye.
Well, if you've liked the channel there, folks, don't forget to subscribe to it and hit that like button. I am the BMD, and we will be back next week.